I'm Heather Marie Montilla, and you're watching PBS Books. Thank you for joining us. PBS Books, in collaboration with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, is pleased to host a program with award-winning filmmaker Tracy Heather Strain, writer, director, and producer of The American Experience, Zora Neale Hurston's Claiming a Space on PBS. This film delves into the life of influential author Zora Neale Hurston, whose groundbreaking anthropological work challenges assumptions about race, gender, and culture superiority. Let's take a moment to watch the trailer.
On American Experience, an influential author whose groundbreaking anthropological work would reclaim, honor, and celebrate Black life on its own terms.
She was an innovator, but the content is rooted in the research that she did. It was anthropology that really showed Hurston that she could write about her culture.
Zora Neale Hurston, Claiming a Space on American Experience.
Well, this film aired in early 2023. Zora Neale Hurston, Claiming a Space is streamable for free at pbs.org, actually for 3 more years. But watch it soon. We are thrilled to have filmmaker Tracy Heather Strain on PBS Books. As we've already hosted Genevieve West, Henry Louis Gates Jr., and Monica Miller discussing Zora's book, You Don't Know Us Negroes, and other essays, as well as Ibram X. Kendi discussing his adaptation of Magnolia Flower and The Making of Butterflies. So let's meet today's guest. Writer, director, and producer Tracy Heather Strain, a 2-time Peabody Award-winning, Emmy-nominated director, producer, writer, and researcher, is a recipient of the 2022 Chicken and Egg Award. Her film, Lorraine Hansberry, cited Eyes and Feeling Heart, which premiered at the 2017 Toronto International Film Festival and broadcast on American Masters, won Strain an NAACP Image Award for Motion Picture Directing and American Historical Association's John E. O'Connor Film Award. Her additional directing credits include American Oz and Building the Alaska Highway for American Experience, The Stories We Tell for Race, The Power of an Illusion, When the Bough Breaks for Unnatural Causes in Inequity, Making Us Sick, Bright Like a Sun, and The Dream Keepers for Black Side's 6-part series, I'll Make Me a World, A Century of African American Arts. Co-founder and president of the film Posse, Strain has served as the Corwin Fuller Professor of Film Studies at Wesleyan University's College of Film and the Moving Image. It is my extraordinary pleasure to welcome Tracy. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, it is such an honor to have you here. And it is, Zora Neale Hurston is someone who means a lot to me. I first read her in high school. She is a celebrated novelist, anthropologist, essayist, and really a central figure in the Harlem Renaissance. You just came out with this amazing film, Claiming a Space. It's premiered, as we just shared, early in 2023. Can you tell us a little bit about the film?
Sure. So most people are aware that know of Zora Neale Hurston are aware that she wrote this magnificent book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. But Zora Neale Hurston, Claiming a Space, tells a story about basically how that book became the way it was. Why is it so magnificent? Well, Zora Neale Hurston's story has a lot to do with her discovering anthropology. So it's a biography. We start with where she grew up in Eatonville, Florida, but we take you on this journey through her life, through being left on her own, living at the age of 13 after her mother dies, to landing at Howard and then at Barnard College, and then landing in landing in New York in the midst of the Harlem Renaissance. But there at Barnard is where she discovered anthropology, and anthropology changes her life. And so the rest of her story is about her trying to find ways to collect Black folklore. She believed Black folklore, Black culture was important, beautiful, and significant. And she made it her life's work to try to let other people know that in a variety of different ways.
Okay, so how did this project come about, and how long did it take?
So Cameo George contacted me. I think she was exercising, and I was at the grocery store, and she called me and said, "We'd like you to think about doing a film for us, and it's about Zora Neale Hurston." And I, of course, had to say yes, because frankly, I did not know a lot about Zora Neale Hurston. I did not grow up at a time when people were reading Zora Neale Hurston in school. And I had spent so much of my adult life in the land of Lorraine Hansberry that I had never really had a chance to really read Zora's works and get to know more about her. I knew certain things about her. I did actually know she was an anthropologist or had studied anthropology, but I was excited to have this chance to learn. I always like learning new things. Right away, though, it was going to be a film that was going to include her anthropology. I think you asked me another question, which I've forgotten.
It was, how long does it take? Did it take from the phone call to it coming out?
So the phone call was over not quite a year before we started the film. We started the film February of 2022, and we delivered it a few days before it aired. And so it took 11 months. Usually a 2-hour film takes longer than that, but we were able to make this film with all that archival in a very rapid amount of time.
That is incredible. Okay, so that is actually the amount of research and archival material that is in this film. I mean, it's a huge part of the film. There's so many. I mean, I do sometimes like to look at archival photographs at different libraries for fun. I'm sure, like everyone else in the world. But you've included amazing images, videos, and audio in this film. Can you talk a little bit about your research process? What libraries, and did you go in person, or you could do it online? Like, how did you get started?
Sure. The research and development phase is my favorite phase in many ways. First, I want to say, though, I did not do this alone. There's a team of people. My husband partner, Randall McLowry, has directed films for American Experience. And so he's experienced in this kind of filmmaking as well. We had a production assistant named Jem McAfee, who was a former student of mine who agreed to move back to Middletown to serve as our production assistant, but she was really in many ways our chief researcher. I would argue that Jem knows much more about Zora Neale Hurston today than I do, because she's the one who read all the books and all the articles in great detail to help me prepare for different things, and or guided me to make sure you read this, make sure you read that. So, but where does it start? Our research always starts at the library. I am a huge, huge fan of libraries. You can see I have all these books back there, and I haven't even read all of them. But we start with secondary sources. So we look for the biographies of Zora Neale Hurston, and one really helpful one was by, sadly, someone who passed away last year. And that was disappointing because I had met her, and she actually had recommended or wanted me to make a film about Zora Neale Hurston. And her name is Valerie. I'm having one of the senior moments, but anyway, that was a really important book. A book by Hemingway had been out a long time. It's important. We just read everything that biographical we could find about her. And then we do something that I never did growing up or in college, which is we read the footnotes. Mm-hmm. We look, because the footnotes provide access to the primary sources in some cases that allow the author to make the claim or include a fact, right? So we collect all of those things. And so we have we organize it all in a huge database, use FileMaker, and we not only put information in. Zora Neale Hurston crossed the street on such a day, if they knew it, and the date and all the information, and we keep track of the page that it came from, where you got the information. So at the end, we have to fact check. And then we also collect, if the book had photographs, we scan those and we put a scratch version of those in the database, and where they say they got it from, because sometimes you can get the same photo from different sources, and sometimes you have to pay for it, sometimes you don't, so we try to be super, super organized. So that's where we start. And then you have to read the primary sources. So maybe the author found certain things out and from a letter that Zora Neale Hurston wrote, and they put in the book, but for the story I'm telling, there might be something else there that is more important for me to share with the audience. So we really draw from a lot of different things. And as I was telling my class today, because I was literally showing them how the beginning of Act 2 changed from treatment all the way to the final project. And it's a process of winnowing down, moving in, putting out, testing things until you get to something that is hopefully beautiful and succinct.
Are there certain libraries that you would say, oh, I use that library the most, or a few that really rise to the top of places you've utilized?
We always use the local library the most. So in my case, we use the Wesleyan University Library, Olin Library the most, and we got some books out of our the town library, the Middletown Library here. It's called the Russell Library. So those were the primary libraries. In terms of archives, we go in person to some archives, and some they are able to work with us online. So even though Yale is close, I think we did primarily everything through phone and online. We went to the Library of Congress, which is where the video that Hurston shot is located. We did photo research there as well. I traveled to Howard University's Moreland Spingarn Library, and we did research there in person. It was nice to be able to touch the actual documents that Zora Neale Hurston wrote Barracoon on, the pieces of paper. So yeah, it's a mixture. Not everything is available online or through Google, as we always tell our students.
And were the originals of Barracoon at Howard, or where do they live?
Yes, the originals of Barracoon are at Howard. The handwritten and typewritten manuscripts were there. I
don't want to be a spoiler, but one of the things that struck me the most was almost at the end of the documentary that basically says, all of her personal papers would have been burned had someone not basically taken them out. Not all, but the ones that were with her towards the end of her life. And that really is striking and scary. And where did you find those papers?
The Zora Neale Hurston papers are located at the George A. Smathers Library at the University of Florida. And so we actually don't know if all her papers were literally there, in terms of what was burned. She moved around so much. And so so some of the things we have are because they were in other people's collections. There were some of her papers in the Elaine Locke collection, for example. But we went to the interesting places, like to do the research for Boaz. I didn't go to this library, but there's a library in Philadelphia. I think I'm saying it right, the American Philosophical Society.
Yes.
Yeah. So we did research there. So we basically
everywhere.
We looked everywhere. We tried to turn every stone possible. And we asked people that had done other work on Zora where they got things. So the person, like, so at the end of the film for the funeral, we tried to find the originals. But the sad thing is a lot of African American history has been lost. Films, there were films that were shot before Zora Neale Hurston shot films of Black life, but we don't know where they are. They're lost or they were destroyed. There are photographs, of course, they're missing. Zora Neale Hurston shot 600 photographs. We don't know where they are. Are they gone? Are they, when she moved around, did Mason get rid of, we just don't know. No. And it has a lot to do with some of the issues in the film that it wasn't valued. People didn't see it as valuable. And so there are newspapers, Black newspapers, that when they closed down, their photo morgue was just destroyed. And so we think that's what's happened with the photos of her funeral. And that's why they don't look so beautiful in the film. But we thought it was important to include them anyway.
So you've alluded a lot in this conversation to how much Zora really moved around, right? She started in Eatonville and made it all the way to New York City. There are, is it about 10 missing years? About,
I think, yeah, at least 8 or 10 missing years.
And is there anything you found out there, but it maybe wasn't,
Yeah. So one thing that we didn't put in the film, it is, it appears that Zora Neale Hurston worked for a traveling theater show. She was a lady's maid to an actress. It was a Gilbert and Sullivan show. And that's where she first learned how to do nails. I think she was sent to get trained. And the woman that she worked for thought that she was so smart and should go out and do something with herself. But I see that as Zora's early exposure to drama and the stage. But we weren't able to put that in the film. We didn't have imagery. We couldn't even just find appropriate Gilbert and Sullivan stand-in kind of imagery to tell that story.
Well, but it's really interesting because I think the film does allude to how she felt drama was so important, and that she saw that as a pivotal way to get her message across. So it's interesting on some level that like, I'm glad you shared that, because I was like, oh, that's interesting. And actually my mind went to, I have a County Cullen early play from like the early 1920s that I had found that I came across, and I was like, oh, I didn't know County Cullen wrote this. Like, right, there's a lot of books, plays that were being written that I don't think a lot of people know were being written at the time, at the height of the Harlem Renaissance. So I'm glad you shared that for sure. Zora arrives in Harlem during the height of the Harlem Renaissance. What do you think are some of the really pivotal moments for Zora?
So the first pivotal moment, I think, is when Zora Neale Hurston gets invited to the Opportunity Awards dinner. So she had already obviously submitted work because she ended up winning 5 prizes, 2 second place awards and 2 honorable mentions. But what's really significant that day, that evening, is that she ends up being invited to attend Barnard College. And she meets Fannie Hurst, who at that time is one of the most famous writers in the United States. And she pursues Hurston later to have her, be her assistant. I think, the point is that she had a way that she was able to get people to find her smart, interesting, attractive, and someone they wanted to help achieve her goals. And that's amazing. I would like to have that skill.
Yes, and we all need a little of that.
I think the other thing about New York is, of course, once she gets to Barnard, is she's encouraged to take an anthropology class, and she does. And her paper is sent to Franz Boas. And we don't know what paper, we don't have the paper, but whatever it was, it impressed one of the world's foremost anthropologists. And it changed the course of her life.
Right, and her entry point, I believe, was 1926, because they're about to come upon the 100th anniversary of her entering Barnard, and I know Barnard is already making plans and talking about that. But I think it's
25.
25. Okay.
She's
but it's super.
She started that fall.
To think about, because she is right the only person like her there. I mean, I think, and for her to, she's still publishing, right? She's literally writing and publishing and working and various things to make it all happen, despite that she has caught the interest and support of various people. I'm sorry, is there anything you'd like to share about?
Well, yeah, I just think it was always hard for her. It's interesting. Support is like, how much support are they giving? They're not giving her enough support to so that she doesn't have to have several jobs. They're not giving her enough support so that, she probably has some spending money to be able to enjoy some of the things that her classmates might have enjoyed, and it is my understanding that, at Barnard, you had to have outfits for everything. You had to have a swimming outfit, your archery outfit, your every sport, tennis stuff, these things were requirements, and those things all cost money. So I'm sure she appreciated the sport she had, but she always had to work these other jobs, and so writing in many ways was a job. It was something she liked to do, but many times it was something she did to make a living.
Now, Ms. Mason takes her on. Do you want to talk a little bit about that relationship?
Charlotte Osgood Mason was a white, wealthy New York person who was obsessed with this notion of the primitive. It was a movement. Teddy Roosevelt was a part of the primitive movement. We actually have our national parks as a result of this movement. But there was this idea, and Carla Kaplan says it really well in the film, that people thought that white Western society was bankrupt, and the only way to sort of save it was through the connection through the primitive. That is like Black people and Native Americans, and so she hired. She's an employee. Zora Neale Hurston becomes an employee of Charlotte Osgood Mason to collect folklore for Mason, because Mason thinks if she has this all stuff collected, it can be used strategically to save white Western society. So and Zora agrees to this because this is her second trip. She wants to go back down to the South. She'd gone the first time through the support of Carter G. Woodson and Elsie Clews Parsons. And so Carter G. Woodson, as you must know, is considered the person who founded Black History Month. Elsie Clews Parsons was a white anthropologist and sociologist. So I love to think that the first time Zora goes down south to collect folklore, she's supported by a Black man and a Black historian and a white female anthropologist, sociologist.
Well, and for those people who are watching and might not be aware, Carter G. Woodson also is the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and so it's all woven together in some ways. The fact that Carter G. Woodson supported Zora Neale Hurston's first trip, which was a bit of a struggle and a challenge, because a lot of the she thought it was going to be easy, and it wasn't necessarily.
It wasn't, and she had a challenging relationship with Carter G. Woodson as well.
Yeah. Well, I thought we could take a moment, and there is actually a short video that features you talking about Zora Neale Hurston and her interest in capturing rural Black folk in writing and her ethnographic work.
Zora Neale Hurston was interested in going south to collect folklore because she was interested in documenting Black lives and thought that Black culture was important and beautiful. Recently, Zora Neale Hurston has gotten a lot of attention because of two books. Barracoon was released, and You Don't Know Us Negroes. Those two books have put Zora Neale Hurston in the public eye, and people have rediscovered her films. Zora Neale Hurston was very interested in capturing the rural Black folk in her writings and in her ethnographic work. Hurston made her second trip to the South in 1927. She was traveling as an employee of Charlotte Osgood Mason, who was a wealthy woman who lived in New York City. Hurston received $200 a month. She took a camera, and Mason gave Hurston money to purchase a car. She captured all sorts of activities of Black people doing different things. So there's children playing games. There is footage of a cookout. There's footage of a baseball game. There's some beautiful footage of just some women on a porch, and one walks to camera. And that's where you definitely see that this is an ethnographic film. She started realizing that what she grew up with was important to document and to study and to share and then to bring to the public. Hurston shot 15 rolls of film, although some are lost, which comes out to be about 85 minutes of material that she shot and or directed. I place Hurston in the early history of film as someone who is anthropology trained, who was using film as an ethnographic tool. Anthropology gave her a kind of license to take these stories and this material that she knew and see it in a new way. It became culture. Hurston was ahead of her time because of her anthropological methods and techniques. So here you have Zora Neale Hurston coming along using a film camera to document people that looked like her, to show that Black culture wasn't something that was set in like amber. Black people were important and beautiful and had significantly contributed to American culture.
Well, if you were just joining us, I'm Heather Marie Montilla, and you are watching PBS Books. It is my pleasure to be here with Tracy Heather Strain, who is the filmmaker of the newly released Zora Neale Hurston, Claiming a Space. We just got to watch a clip where Heather was speaking, where Tracy was speaking about the importance of Zora Neale Hurston and her ethnographic work. I'd like to invite Tracy back in. Tracy, it showed amazing footage, as does the longer 2-hour film, and really helps audiences to see the importance of Zora's work at the moment she was capturing it. In the film, you discuss why Zora struggled. And in fact, I just want to, if we could talk a little bit about her patron, Ms. Mason, to share with the audience. As an employee, she had to like document every single expenditure to the penny. What type of effects, like even psychological effect, do you think that had to account for every cent she spent on this extensive trip to do research?
By Zora Neale Hurston's own account, it was stressful to try to make sure that she was pleasing Mason, so that she could keep doing the work that she loved. I mean, think of it as, you're a grown adult person, and every single thing you do, you have to like write down and account for. And as we say in the film, even her feminine hygiene products, had to be listed. One of the things we don't get into in the film is that Zora had had gastro issues, and so sometimes she needed medications, or what was perceived to be medications at that time, to deal with that, and you can see that in the list as well, or she'd have to talk to Mason about that. And at one point, she's already down because her play wasn't successful. She has a hole in her shoes, and she has to ask Mason for money to get a pair of shoes, because apparently Mason had only wanted her to have one pair of shoes at a time. So I have a hard time imagining what that would be like, but it's stressful and probably a little demoralizing.
Certainly demoralizing. So obviously that relationship was tense at times. Another relationship that was significant that your film touches upon is her relationship with Langston Hughes. Can you talk a little bit about that, and even talk to the party book?
Langston Hughes was still a college student when Zora Neale Hurston met him. And they became fast friends because he's one of the people who was in New York who actually was interested in the folk and rural life. And so when she went down on her first trip to the South, she ran into him in Mobile. She actually went to see Cujo Lewis 2 times, and the first time was on the first trip. And that's when she ran into Langston Hughes, and he agreed to drive back north with her. And they became fast friends. And that's when she learned about Charlotte Osgood Mason. And he went with her as she was finishing up her research. So they ended up getting to all sorts of fun things, and went to concerts. They went to conjure sessions. They went to speakeasies and juke joints. Juke joints. And so they really shared a lot. And then over time, once she was also supported by Mason, they were supposed to be writing an opera, but they ended up secretly working on a play. And it conspired to be partly a reason that they fell out. But before they fell out, Zora Neale Hurston was taking one of his book of poems called it's called Fine Clothes, and she would read it to these men and women in these different locations, and they would put the poems to music and sing songs, and basically Zora Neale Hurston sing her folklore being created right in front of her, and it was really exciting. And so it's actually a pretty fun point in the film, because we use her letters to Langston Hughes to discuss it. They're really her relationship to Langston Hughes is really important to the filmmaking as well, because it allows us to know what she's thinking about the work she's doing. That's really our main way of really knowing, because it's in the moment, as opposed to maybe her autobiography or memoir that she writes later, which isn't. It's written after the fact, and it wasn't written at the time. So it's a different look at her life.
Memoirs, I sometimes think are a bit of fiction too, sometimes. And we can talk a little bit more about that, because also her memoir was highly edited, as you all pointed out. But before we get there, tenacity, persistence, and dedication. Over and over again, I feel Zora, the door is closed in Zora's face, and she will say, nope, like I'm still here, and I'm still working, and I'm still interested, and I'm still exploring, in a way that I admire her so much. Oh, because it happens over and over again. Can you talk to some of the examples within your film, maybe the Guggenheim, like the first Guggenheim Fellowship, just some of the things that happened? Because I think when I think of Zora Neale Hurston as this complex individual, your film really underscores the grit that she had, and yet she kept on persevering to create and to share her artistry and her knowledge of anthropology and ethnography with all of us.
Zora Neale Hurston was under the impression that the team of people at Columbia, Franz Boas, Benedict, were on her side. And so they're not coming up with money for her to do her research. And so I don't know how she heard about the Guggenheim Fellowships, but she applied for a Guggenheim, and you need 5 references. And she asked Franz Boas and Benedict to write for her, and they're private. So we don't know if Zora we don't think she saw them, but I think she had an idea that they weren't supportive later. So basically, Boas and Benedict basically say that she is not Guggenheim material, that she doesn't that she doesn't have the goods. And in the film, we have a chorus of voices to help unpack that. And, there's this notion that, she doesn't have a PhD. Well, some people think you need a PhD, but not all Guggenheim fellows have PhDs. And, so it's, the idea is like, what is the problem here? And so she doesn't get the Guggenheim. She's still moving forward in life. She seems to take every rejection as like, okay, I'm just going to move on. But she does apply later. And she doesn't ask Boas and Benedict to be recommenders. She asked Melville Herskovitz, who used to work with those guys at Columbia, but was now at Chicago. And he was considered a foremost authority on Black culture at the time. But he writes this recommendation that says that she's the foremost authority in this. And she gets not only 1 Guggenheim, but she gets 2. She gets back-to-back Guggenheims. And so I think that's one of the best examples of how she is just not going to wallow in, the woe is me. So I always like to use her. She's like my new example personally, but also to sort of direct younger people to think about the fact that people face rejection. You have to try to learn how to deal with it. And it's sad, but can you learn something from the experience? Can you move on? Maybe you didn't have the best application. Who knows, whatever it is, but keep going, persevere. Everything doesn't happen overnight for people. I think there's a way our society sometimes people can easily get caught up on what they perceive as an overnight success. And if you really look into it, that individual probably was working for many, many hours before this overnight success happened.
I think that is true. We're also in a very different place of an instantaneous gratification society. But I do think what was interesting also about her Guggenheim that she was awarded is then she did become also an outsider in her work. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Are you talking about the fact that she is, do you mean her techniques?
Or... I'm referring to that she then goes to Jamaica. And
right. Yes. Yes, of course.
So, right.
Yes. Yes. So Zora Neale Hurston, until she got the Guggenheim, she was working primarily in the United States. She had been to, the Caribbean before, but this was going to be extensive study. So she went to Jamaica and Haiti, and suddenly she's an outsider. And this is another. It's not just that these are Black people. These are Black people from another country who've had another historical experience and relationship to their governments, or in the case of Haiti, U.S. occupation, and maybe for a variety of reasons, different connections to their African past. So Zora Neale Hurston is kind of now in the position of being more like all the other anthropologists. She is not an insider, and she has to try to find a way to try to do her own Zora Neale Hurston brand of anthropology, but also recognize that it's going to take longer. It's harder. It's going to be harder for her because this is not her culture. And, people, particularly now in contemporary society, have there are some strong critiques out there about her work, particularly in Haiti and Jamaica, in terms of what she's written.
So you've touched a little bit on Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Are Watching God. And in 1937, it was published to critical acclaim. In the book, she blends two worlds, her work as a writer and an anthropologist, really for the first time, creating fiction informed by science, at least I don't think it's really the first time she did it fully, but the first time, right, the world is really looking in and seeing it. Can you speak a little bit about this, but also about the challenge that occurred because it wasn't well received by male Black contemporaries, and what that really, the difficulty that created for Zora?
So our favorite scene, the team's favorite scene in the movie, is the Their Eyes Were Watching God scene, because everything is coming together. All the stuff we were trying to set up, it's coming together for her in this book. And we worked really hard. I was really interested in trying to make an audience looking on a flat screen feel very present in the moment of her writing. So we tried to use music and imagery and some animation and views of the text on screen, and you're hearing it, to create this moment where you can really feel and experience this rich anthropology, these ethnographic descriptions of lives that are not just but they have this literary glow, sheen on them, right? Because she's a very good writer. And so so it's this is this big moment. And then what happens in the film is that, doesn't sell well. And we suggest that it doesn't help that the Black writers, many of them who were able to get attention at that time, were not supporters. They did not like the work. They did not seem interested in a lead character who was a woman. They did not like that it wasn't overtly political, even though there's politics all over this, and racism is addressed in the work. And as Maria Katera suggests in the film, it smacks of sexism, right? Richard Wright isn't famous yet. That's why I don't mention that, his book, because it hasn't come out yet. And I also sometimes wonder if it's a case of that scenario that seems to exist where people want to kill kill the famous person out there to make a name for themselves, right? And then the last thing I'll say is, as Daphne Lamothe says, the Negro is no longer in vogue. People are, the Depression has made people turn away from a kind of attention that existed earlier, and so you have that happening as well. And so the books that are working well are more hard hitting about race.
Well, I sometimes wonder, I know that your film points out that her response to Alain Locke was never published, of his criticism. And then your film also covers her autobiography, Dust Tracks on the Road, and how there were significant segments that were just edited out. And some of the scholars point out kind of a surprise that she didn't fight for it. And I just wanted your opinion, because all along this film, you see she is always fighting, right? She's fighting to make her way. She is claiming that space, which is such a great name, because she's working really hard. It's an upward battle. She is not only a woman, she is a Black woman in a time where she's not supposed to be doing any of these things, right? By society standards. And so I was thinking you could share a little bit just about your opinion. I mean, is she tired, or is she saying, well, let's have this go, and I will make way in other ways?
Yeah. Zora Neale Hurston made adjustments on all her manuscripts. I think that, I haven't had this experience yet. I hope to have it soon of, working with a publisher on a book. And so she, it is my understanding that they asked for changes and things, and I guess it's a negotiation. But by the time we get to, the 40s, when Dust Tracks is about to come out, she's used up all her money for the Guggenheim. I think she does one book. Tell My Horse comes out after Their Eyes Were Watching God, which is the book that has the Haiti and Jamaica material in it. She does get another book out, but she's not getting as much work. And so, the scholars think that the only reason she agreed to write an autobiography was so that she could get money. And so she had a lot of sharp political commentary in Dust Tracks. And it seems that she had to get it published during World War II. Excuse me. That she agreed to take it out so that she could get some money.
So let's talk about her legacy, right? So she is working in libraries, doing this and that, still writing, active in Florida, in the town she lives in. There's a newspaper that appears, your film discusses it, where she's actually a maid probably in her 60s. And by 1969, she passes away of heart disease and had been living in a segregated nursing home. I mean, this is heartbreaking. And I guess my question for you, because then many people hadn't heard or read about Zora Neale Hurston until the mid 1970s, when Alice Walker wrote in search of Zora Neale Hurston. What are some of your thoughts? Why do you think this has all happened? Or this is really the story that your story in some ways is telling because of her uphill battle all along?
Yeah, in many ways, the story we're telling is a story about Black women and their relationship to society. I'm about to go to this event where there's going to be a room full of Black female filmmakers, and many of them should have had bigger, better careers than they did. They're so talented. But many of the contributions of Black women had not been recognized. You need a champion. You need champions to be able to get support, to have your work seen, read, and she didn't have that, and she lost the ones that she had for a variety of reasons. But she should have been able to have a university position, a good one, or she should have. There's just a lot. Why didn't I have a lot of questions. She might have had a challenging personality, but she also, if she had all this talent, why weren't people helping her? Why didn't the people at Columbia help her more? And so her life shows how race and gender play out for Black women. And it's maybe the story for somebody else is a little different, but there's so many similarities. I've had so many people talk about how familiar this story is to them. Or I've had women who are African American talk about similar things happening to them. And, no one wants to end up, like Zora Neale Hurston. I've even had younger women who are studying anthropology tell me that the field hasn't changed that much and they don't necessarily feel welcomed in the field. So, it's kind of sad, right?
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I have to say, documentary doesn't have much better history either.
So this is a personal question. Are there traits of Zora that you see in yourself?
I'd like to think that I think I'm tenacious in a different way than Zora Neale Hurston. I think, we had completely different kinds of upbringings. I think Zora Neale Hurston had to make her way in the world alone, right? Primarily alone. Sometimes family members were in her life. But I did not. I had, my parents are alive and, have supported me along my entire journey. So I haven't had to be scrappy in that way, right? That she was, but I am often underestimated like her. And I feel that, and I know this is common, that I have something sometimes to prove, but not in a way that is so apparent, It's just like, I'm going to outlast you on this, or I'm going to
Yeah.
Lorraine Hansberry took 14 years to make, and it actually is longer, but we have a kind of a start date at 14, official start date. But I know for a fact there were people that didn't think I was ever going to finish that film. And, I did. And, it took a long time. I hope I never have to make a film that takes that long. I don't have, I'll have to live on.
But this one took 2 years, and that's unheard of. I don't think I've ever had someone on this show who's done anything into
No, this took 11 months.
11 months. Oh my gosh, because you said 20.
So I talked to Cameo in 2021, but we didn't start until the February of 2022. The official start date is in the first week of February in 2022.
So I'm thinking you really didn't talk to any of your friends for a whole 11 months, because it's incredible what you've woven together, and the narrative and the story and the amount of scholars who are featured in this. I know a lot of people, when I started speaking to people in December about this film coming out, were really excited, but also surprised. They were like, "Oh, they didn't know it was coming." And
right, because usually you get done over 2 months beforehand, and there's long lead press. And as you will recall, I said we delivered the film on the 11th to GBH. They delivered to PBS on the 13th, and it went on television on the 17th. It was a crazy year. 2022 was probably the most challenging year of my life, and for a variety of reasons. And I was last semester, I also was teaching 2 classes. So, yeah.
Amazing. We always like to ask our guests as we close, what are you working on now?
Sure. So there are 2 main projects that Randy and I are working on. One, I actually we started working on both, actually. We're developing 2 independent projects. One is about Black people's relationship to water and swimming, and it's called Survival Floating. And another one is about John Henry, and it's going to look into the man, the myths, and the music. And that working title right now is John Henry, America's Real First Black Superhero.
Well, I love that, and I hope we'll have you back on when those come out, and hopefully they'll come out on PBS. It has been, Tracy, such a pleasure to have you on the show today, and I hope for everyone out there who has not yet seen Zora Neale Hurston Claiming a Space, you will make time, because your dedication, Tracy's dedication to research and thoroughness, and just how it is displayed, and is the narrative, the journey we all go through in seeing Zora grow into the person she is and create. It's really extraordinary. So I want to thank you for this amazing work and for spending the time with us.
Thank you so much. Can I just say one thing? I'll give another plug for the film. We just showed it on campus recently to, college students and faculty and staff. And one of the students afterwards came up and really liked the film. And she said, I didn't think I was going to like this kind of film. And she says, but I was captivated from the first frame. So to me, that is like great praise when a 20-something says they like a 2-hour historical documentary and was riveted.
That is actually a huge endorsement. And so for all of our library partners as well, I think knowing the mass appeal of this documentary to share, and it is available for free streaming for the next 3 years, which is also so unique for PBS programming and such a wonderful gift to all of us. So thank you for that. I also always take a moment to thank our library partners, more than 1,800 strong across the country, numerous PBS stations who share this important content with all of you. But most importantly, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Well, thank you for being here this evening. Until next time, I'm Heather Marie Montilla, and happy reading.